Those of you that were on teams that went Monday, aren't you glad you came today? Because I'm looking around the room, a lot of people are missing in this class. And I think they're missing a lot today because I think that we're seeing these teams apply some of what we talked about on Monday. And I think that you're having the potential to get some things solidified in your head in terms of kind of good ways to do this.
Thank you.
This guy, this player on our team right here.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Ruben Sanchez. This is Leslie Alvarado, Oscar Escobedo, and Luis Villa, and we're going to go over the Brexit for you guys. So basically, we're going to cover how we got to this point with the referendum, and we're going to talk about three main issues, which is British sovereignty, immigration, and the British economy, and what we can expect in the future years. So first, Leslie is going to go over British sovereignty.
Well, hello. As the first topic being introduced, sovereignty is a main issue, part of the British exit. I'm going to give a little factors about if the results of Britain leaving and staying. So if they would have left, obviously they were going to have issues with their sovereignty in the British Parliament, and if they would have stayed within the EU, every country would have to work closer together to flourish more their economy. As of last week, we all know that the voting happened, and the UK has been voted out of the EU. So what does that mean for the UK now? Well, now they're considered as a single country, more independent. So obviously they're going to have to modify the constitution more and focus more in parliamentary supremacy, their national law, and democracy. One of the examples that we took into consideration and as part of our research was the Texas, when around the Civil War, Texas and the Union. Texas also did not agree with the Union's laws that they had stated, so Texas decided to leave. So who does this really affect? Well, it obviously affects trade, it affects their economy, it affects their politics, but most important, their people. So the UK didn't have a voice over their national sovereignty, but it does have a big issue in immigration. So we're going to pass it on to Oscar with immigration.
So immigration was an important factor in deciding whether to leave or stay in the EU. The majority of the population that voted to leave the EU was an older population, with reports saying that the over 50 years old population was the majority of that vote. The main concern that they had concerning immigration was the lack of immigration control in the UK. As it is, any EU citizen has the automatic right to live and work and visit the UK. If you look over at the graph that we've presented here, we could see that over a 15-year term that the net migration has had an overall growth, almost doubling from 2000 to 2015. The net migration is the overall number that is calculating the difference between the people that are coming into the UK and leaving the UK. The UK-born citizens are weary of these high numbers because they are afraid that the amount of immigrants that are coming into the UK are highly educated, sometimes more educated and have a lot of experience, thus taking jobs away from those that are already in the UK. If we look over at our next slide, you'll see that we also have another net migration chart. And in this chart is showing us the comparison between non-EU and EU immigrants coming into the UK. In 2015, the comparison was very close. The UK immigrants that were outside of the EU made up for 50.5%, and the EU immigrants were at 49.5%. Now, these statistics are very important to those that would prefer to stay in the EU, because they believe that higher amounts of immigration will lead to a better economy. They think that the concern over immigration control has been overblown. And they believe that if you have more people coming in that are better educated or just highly educated and well skilled, that will create more jobs and instead of bringing a decline in jobs. Those that want to stay in the EU or that have voted to stay in the EU do have some concerns now that the majority of the vote was to leave. And they can't be 100% sure about what is to come, but they do have concerns about the economic cost that will come with this decision. And going over the economic issues today will be Lewis.
Thank you, Oscar. Well, going over the economic issues, here are the current economic issues we have. One thing, global currencies and commodities were affected. Those of you that were kept up with it, gold rose significantly. Gold, the dollar, the yen, and I believe the euro rose against the pound. The pound dropped significantly. We can look at this chart here. The pound itself went ahead and look at the day they voted on Thursday late night to Friday. That was a big drop, and it still dropped, I believe, all the way down to 130, which was at a 30-year low. UK economy loses billions in a matter of like 2 days, less than 24 hours. Actually, they lost 164 billion. That's just the UK economy. The FTSE would be the equivalent to the Dow Jones. Another thing they lost, since their pound went down a lot of people put a lot of the trade treaties on hold. So that affected the global markets substantially. For example, the Dow Jones lost, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. The Dow Jones lost nearly 900 points, but from Tuesday on to today, I think it's back on the rebound. The Nikkei lost. One thing it did cause was global chaos, and uncertainty. Reason I say that because now with UK leaving, Sweden wants to leave. If you know, the Prime Minister resigned. And unfortunately that he's not actually resigned until, well, he technically resigned, but he's going to be in office till October. So that's when the actual real talks are going to start. So they voted to leave, but they haven't actually left. Technically they're still in. The actual real talks start in October. One thing it affects, one thing you guys know, know that the war in the Ukraine, a lot of it, has to do with them joining the EU, NATO, and all that. That caused even more uncertainty. With one country leaving, what happens to these countries? It's just now in Scotland itself wants to leave the UK. So if we can touch on the next slide, you'll see the Dow Jones index. You'll see in the 5-day span from last week, from the Thursday to the Friday, and then the Monday. Now, if you notice, look at that big drop. That's a negative drop, so those of you that follow that. All right, it was close to 900 points. All right. Now, looking at the next slide, this is the Nikkei. This is another big one to follow. Look at the Nikkei. It dropped really bad. It was in the high 14s. It went from 800, I believe, to down to 14,700. And if you notice the trend, it just keeps on going down in negative slope. Now the FTSE, this was the one that hit them really bad. The FTSE, look at that. That's just a straight slope down. You see that? And then at the end of the day, it stabilized. It stabilized back up a bit, and it just keeps on that negative trend. And with that, just leaves uncertainty, because as of right now, it tells us we don't even know what's going on. Everything seems to stabilize, but Oscar's going to touch on that, and he's going to tell you, some uncertainties and some certainties. Ruben, I'm sorry.
So what can we expect? First of all, I'd like to mention that this is an incredibly big deal for us. Because like he said, it does create so much uncertainty, and the markets don't like uncertainty. And when we have uncertainty, we see huge dips like this. But I'd also like to touch on, there's an underlying conservative and liberal battle here. And overall, the research I've done, it's really striking the similarities between our government and theirs and the people. So much like the right-wing conservatives here want to build a wall, so that their conservative policies over there, and they got it done. So in the next 2 years, like he mentioned, David Cameron has resigned. They also have the Labour Party, who has lost like 8 to 10 members who resigned due to their leadership, which is a part of the Liberal group. But their politics is in turmoil right now. So in the next 2 years, David Cameron's going to resign, the EU is pushing back and saying, you guys have to get it together and make a quick decision. But these are Europeans, so a quick decision for them might be like 2 years. So next 2 years, we can definitely expect more turmoil and more uncertainty, which is going to cause these markets to fluctuate once again. Right now, they're kind of stabilizing, but we can see more uncertainty come. For the next 7 to 10 years, they're going to have to renegotiate every trade agreement that they have with all individual 27 members of the EU. So this is going to take quite a bit of time. And meanwhile, they will be having, tariffs and taxes, and they're still going to have to meet the same guidelines that they were part of with the EU. They're just going to be outside of the EU, paying more tax. So they're basically taking a step back in hopes that they take, 2 steps forward for the future. For us in the States, here at home, obviously the stock market has fluctuated a bit. It's getting back to where it needs to be. But a big part is our banking sector. So our European banking sector is stationed in London, and that was kind of our doorstep into the European Union, if you will. And so that now has to move. And so we're going to have to, banks like Chase and Wells Fargo are going to have to move their banks from London, not necessarily the whole bank. Obviously, we'll keep some people there, but the majority is going to have to move to somewhere in Europe so we have access to the European Union, and which means less jobs for Brits and obviously more chaos for us moving that whole sector. There is a silver lining for investment, right? So let's take the analogy of much like the people here at home bought into oil and gas when it was $26 a barrel. What is it, like $50 now? So they doubled their return on investment. Same thing here. If you think about buying, some property in London at 20% under the actual value, most people would, if you had the money, buy that because it's going to come back, much like our oil and gas will. They'll be back. It's just going to take a long time, and there's still more uncertainty. And so we don't know for sure the long term what can happen. But we don't know if the EU is going to unravel, if the UK is going to unravel, or everything's going to be great and we work it all out. And we hope that we do.